many types, okay? So I put the ones that are the very most common in blue, but you'll also find the ones in purple. So you may want to go to the page I was telling you to go to later and study this a little better. But the most common relationships are things like, things are the same in some way. Things are opposite. That's the relationship. Or it could be, especially with words, they're synonyms. They mean the same thing. It could be things like a tool and the object it's used with, like a hammer and a nail, or a category and an object in the category, like fish and salmon. Effect and cause, like a flood is caused by rain. Sickness is caused by germs. Cause and effect, the cause is first and the effect is second. Rain causing a flood, or practice causing improvement. Something in a sequence, childhood to adulthood, or May before June. So this list of 27 very common relationships are something you may want to take a look at and show your child, because these are the things they can be looking for when they're trying to solve analogies, is these types of relationships. These are the kinds they're going to see when they see verbal analogies. So let's look at one more example of some advice for verbal analogy questions, but this advice that I'm about to give you actually holds true for many other types of CogAT questions. And that is that sometimes you're going to see that there looks like there might be more than one answer choice that is possible for a question. And when that's the case, just remember that you are looking for the best answer choice, and you're going to have to make a judgment call. So here, for example, cantaloupe is to strawberry as polar bear is to what? And our choices are the North Pole, blackberry, seals, or Arctic wolves. Well, let's see. Cantaloupe and strawberry, those are both different types of fruit, and they're very specific types of fruit. So here's a polar bear, right? So what is another kind of a bear? Or another kind of, if not a bear, maybe another kind of animal that lives in the Arctic. It could be one of the two. We're not really sure. But these are both different kinds of fruit. So what is similar with polar bears? We've got seals and we've got Arctic wolves. If we had another bear, then a bear would probably be the answer, but we don't. So we do have seals and Arctic wolves that both live in the Arctic. So one of those is going to be the answer. And the way I would analyze this is that since they both live in the Arctic, seals are a more broad category of animals in the Arctic, but Arctic wolves are very specific. And it's as specific as a polar bear, just like cantaloupe and strawberries are very specific. So I would choose D as being the best choice. And you sometimes get into these where, you're like, well, this is as good an answer as this, but they are going to be looking for the best answer. So sometimes you do have to make these judgment calls. The other thing you want to tell your child to watch out for in all of these questions is something called distractors. And the way that I usually explain it to kids is that anybody who writes these different tests, they try to trick you by putting answers in that may seem right at first glance, but if you really look at it, you realize they're wrong. So for example, they'll come up with answer choices that might be very similar to the first two, or even just similar to this one, but not a analogous relationship. And in this example, blackberry is a distractor, because if you weren't thinking and you were going really fast, you might see cantaloupe, strawberry, blackberry, and you would pick it. And that's a distractor. And you just want to watch out for those, okay? So now I want to show you some verbal classification questions. So if you'll recall, if you've taken part one, verbal classifications for pictures for younger kids would be the things on top go together in a very specific way, and you need to think of a rule that describes how these go together. And then you find one item from below that belongs on top because they follow the same rule. So in this case here, we have everything on top is 5. There are 5 people in this band. There's 5 pennies in a nickel, and there are 5 fingers on a hand. So we're looking for another 5 down here. And in fact, the number 5 would be the answer. So the strategy, of course, is think of a rule that describes the similarities between the first 3 pictures or words, and then you find an answer choice that belongs there, and only one answer choice should fit the rule. If you find that more than one fits the rule, your rule is too broad, just like we talked about with analogies, and you need a more specific rule. So here's an example, another example, like if you saw something like this, which is a cab, looks like a what do you call those? Skateboard and on a motorcycle, and you might say, oh, they're all transportation. They'll get you somewhere. But then if you look at all the answer choices down here, more than one would also be called transportation. So you need a more precise rule. And in this case, these are all transportation with wheels. So which one of these has wheels? That would be the mail truck. Now here are some of the very most common mistakes kids make. With this example, it's guitar, banjo, harp. And then the possible answers of what goes with this would be trombone, trumpet, flute, violin, and instrument. Examples of mistakes, I'm actually going to go back to this one for a second. A common mistake that kids will make is that they will pick something on the bottom that just reminds them of something on top without thinking, without figuring out that rule. So a child may very quickly pick a penny or a dime because there's a coin up here, or they might pick any instrument here just because these are instruments. The other thing that kids often do is they go to the broad category that the items belong to instead of the member. These are all members of the instruments category. But a lot of times a child will look at this and go, oh, those are all instruments, and they pick E. But what we're looking for is we are looking for something on the bottom that is the same type of instrument, perhaps, as these. And if a rule that is more specific that helps them hold together, other than just being instruments, is these are all instruments that have strings. So a violin is an instrument with strings, and that would be the best answer here. Okay, so that's a common mistake. You might see your child make that mistake. I make that mistake sometimes when I'm not thinking or I'm hurrying. It's a very easy mistake to make. So now we're going to talk about sentence completion, okay? And they're different at the younger level and the older level. At the younger level, here it's going to be all pictures. And at the younger level, what kids need is they need to know vocabulary. They need to know what the words in the question mean, and then they need to know what the pictures are of. So vocabulary is critical for younger kids. As they get older, they need both vocabulary and they're going to need sentence to understand sentence structure, because at the older level, they are filling in a word that completes a sentence. So they need to understand all the words in the sentence. They need to understand all the words in the answer choices, and they need to know sentence structure to handle those questions. So the number one strategy for all kids for sentence completion is just building your vocabulary skills. Do this any way you could do this. You could be going through vocabulary lists. You could be taking, in our summer camp, we do vocabulary classes every week to help kids build their vocabulary. and so just learning vocabulary. Read as much as you can. That's another great way to learn vocabulary. Now, let's say this is a strategy. Let's say you see a question like this, but you don't know exactly what all the words mean. So let's say you see this. Which would you use if you ripped a garment? So let's say you don't know what a garment is, but you do know what ripped means. So if something is ripped and you don't even know what garment means, you're sure that lipstick is probably not the answer, because we know that a needle and thread is used to fix a ripped piece of cloth, and I suppose that a nail could rip something, but you don't really. I guess maybe a ripped piece of paper could be fixed by Scotch tape. But at least, if nothing else, you can definitely get rid of the lipstick. And what you can do is make your best guess when you don't know every word in a sentence. So, and then in something like this sentence here, let's say, let me read it real quick. Because of the harm caused by dolphins, we are going to sub-blank that brand of tuna. Let's say you see all these words here, but you don't know what boycott means, okay? You know that we are going to dine that brand of tuna does not make sense grammatically. We are going to broil that brand of tuna. You don't usually broil a brand of tuna, so that can't be right. And because of the harm caused to dolphins, we are going to eat or buy. You probably wouldn't want to do that because we're talking about some kind of harm. So even if you don't know what this word means, you can use logic almost to eliminate the others. If not every single word in the answer choices, you can use logic to eliminate some of the words and then make your best guess. Strategy that I suggest for these types of questions are, read the overall sentence first and just think about what word would you put in there. What word might fit there? And do you see an answer choice that is similar? You look for context clues. So, for example, here we start out with, because of the harm caused to dolphins, we're going to do something. We're looking for a solution or something that helps the situation. So you're going to be looking for words that might help the situation, and certainly eating and buying would not be the right ones. The other thing is you look for signaling words. So as we talked about already, the word harm is telling you that we're, something negative. So we're looking for a response to something negative. So which words might respond to something negative? If you see words like but, however, or although, what they're telling you is that there's a complete change of direction in the second part of the sentence. So you're looking for words that indicate a complete change of direction in the second part of the sentence. Or you might see words like, half part of a sentence, and then furthermore, or indeed, that means you're going to be saying something that supports what was said in the first part of the sentence. So if you find these signaling words, it can help you logically figure out what you're looking for. And grammar, just make sure that the words grammatically make sense. Like, we are going to dine that brand of tuna does not make sense, because at least grammatically that's wrong. The other thing is, if you see two or more words in an answer choice for sentence completion that are synonyms, they would not be the answer, because if they mean the same thing, you wouldn't have two that mean exactly the same thing. So here we have eat and dine, they're synonyms. We know those are not right. So these are all ways that you can analyze these sentence completion questions and come up with the best answer. Okay, so now we're going to look at analogies for number analogies. And number analogies are very similar to the verbal analogies we were just going through. We're looking for a rule that describes how the first number or the first quantity you see relates to the second number. So just by looking at this one, we see that it's 3 bowls to 6 bowls. So we're either going to add 3 or we're going to double. We don't know which one. But since we don't have an answer choice below, if we do the same thing, let's say we try adding 3 dogs to 1 dog, but there's no answer that is 4 dogs. So let's try doubling it. 1 dog doubled is 2 dogs, and that's an answer choice. So that's going to be our answer. Same thing here. And you would do the same thing here that we just talked about, is you really look for a rule, and you would start by, you might try starting by applying the simplest rule, which we did. We tried to add 3 dogs, but that didn't work, and so then we doubled it, which is the harder one, and that's really the strategy for these. For this one, some of the common mistakes are that the student just only sees one rule between, let's say the first pair of numbers, and they don't go on to make sure that's the correct rule. That will happen. So for example, here they might say, oh, we're going to subtract 8 to get to 4. So I'm going to subtract 8 here, and the answer is 10. But that's not correct, because that isn't how we got to 5. The way we did get here was we divided by 3, and we have to try another rule. So you make sure you apply your rule to all of the different options here. So that is one example. Another example of a mistake kids make is that they just sort of choose an answer based on appearances, and they aren't even trying to figure out the rule. So for example, here you see lots of looks like a lot of bowls here, so they might just say, okay, I'm going to go with a lot of dogs and pick that. That is a common mistake kids will make. So you just have to make sure they are thinking of that rule, and they are applying the rule to the last picture or the last number. The other problem that leads to mistakes on these is that kids just do not yet have the math skills to figure out some of the analogies as they get much harder. Here we have the quantitative number series questions. And I'm going to show you what they look like for younger kids and what they look like for older kids. Right here, this is what they look like for younger kids. And these are 3 of the more common kinds of rules that take place. The way this type of question works is it's like an abacus for younger kids. And they have to figure out, is there a pattern or a rule, a mathematical rule that is being followed that guides what belongs on the last rod? Okay, so that's what we have to figure out. So the types of things to look for are, this is just like a repeating pattern, and this one is A, B, B, C, C. So this is the answer. This is just a repeating pattern, very simple. This one is a mathematical rule, okay? And if you look at it, you can see we're subtracting 3, then we subtract 3. So if we subtract 3 again, here's the answer. So that's a very common one for young kids. Now, the thing you need to teach your child is that for even with little ones, little kids, sometimes the patterns are alternating. Like, so for here, what we're doing, what's happening is we're alternating between rods. So every other rod, we're adding 1, and here every other rod, we're subtracting 1. So this is the answer. So sometimes you'll see patterns like this, so they have to know to look for them. So, teach your child when they're trying to figure this out, first know the different rules, practice a lot so you'll get used to what the different rules are. The first thing to do usually is kind of look at the differences between each rod and just kind of think about whether it's a pattern or if it's mathematical or what's going on. And you might have to use a combination of math skills and logic to figure these out. very common mistakes that you see on these is that they see one change between rods and then they kind of misapply the rules. So, um, for example, let's see, in the repeating pattern here, maybe the child sees that we're adding one here, so they want to add one, and so maybe they pick this one. So they don't really look at it very carefully. The other common mistake, is they haven't practiced enough, so they don't know the different types of patterns to look for. And then the same that we talked about before is some kids just don't have the math knowledge to figure out what the rule is. Okay, so here are a few more patterns that we have. It gets more complex with numbers, and this is what we get with for older kids, is they will see numbers and then they have to figure out what is next in the series. So with this type of question, they just have to figure out, this is an arithmetic pattern. So what is the difference? These are sequences of numbers that are subtracted or added. And in this case, it's you add +5, +5, +5, +5. So it's just +5. So 22 + 5 is going to be 27. So that is an arithmetic pattern. And you can either add or you can subtract. It's called a geometric pattern if instead of adding, you would be either multiplying or dividing to get to the next numbers. And those are common too. And in this case, it's just times 7 times 7 times 7. So if you figure out, if you divide this into that, you'll figure out, oh, it was times 7 times 7 times 7 to get to each number. So that's a geometric type pattern. So again, what you do is you look at the differences between the numbers to try to figure out what is going on. Are they increasing? Are they decreasing? If they're increasing, they're probably adding or multiplying. If they are decreasing, they might be subtracting or dividing. And try to figure out what really is going on there. And just know that with these patterns, they can be applied to whole numbers, which is what we're doing here. They can be applied to fractions, decimals, negative numbers, Roman numerals, all kinds of things, even shapes. So you're going to see this type of pattern in a lot of situations. So just know it can be applied in many situations. And then here, I want to show you that there are other types of patterns to look for, and I'm giving them to you right here. This one is what we call a multiple operations pattern, arithmetic pattern. It's the number, it's times 2 + 1 to get to each one of these. So you multiply by 2 and add 1, multiply by 2, add 1. So so that's one type. Then the alternating pattern, which we looked at before, where the pattern of adding 4 alternates with a pattern of subtracting 6. So, 4 to 8, we added 4, add 4, add 4, and then subtract 6, subtract 6, subtract 6. And then you've got what's called a cyclical pattern. This is another example. And you look at these and they can be kind of tricky, but what's happening here, if you study it, is that the last number is moving to the first place each time. So that's how that one works. And it ends up, when you have one like this, it's also an ABCD pattern. So, but that's another type of pattern to look for. And then a random pattern, which could be anything, but I gave you one example, is 108. You look at all of these and you study it and you figure out, you might try different things to see how you're getting from number to number to number. But what is happening here, if you study it, is the first digit is increased by 1 each time. The second digit is increased by 2 each time. And the third digit decreases by 1 each time. And that's how we get to the answer. So what I wanted to just let you know is that right here, in my testingmom.com/classes, I have a whole class on how to solve mathematical patterning and serial reasoning questions, because they come up in so many different tests. So the strategy here is, one big strategy is You have to know the different types of patterns to look for. And remember, if the numbers just make no sense next to each other, try out the alternating patterns, try out the sort of random patterns, and maybe even cyclical patterns to see if you can figure out what's going on. And it's just very important that kids have strong math skills to be able to figure out what's happening in a math series question. Because to figure these out, you need both. You need good math skills and you need good reasoning and thinking skills. And this is a thinking test. It's a cognitive test. So that's what you need for this one. Okay. Now, the last type of question for quantitative is for younger kids. It's done with they're actually done with trains. We have some practice questions on our website that are with boats, but the actual test does use trains. But these are just some of our own. And what you need to do here is you're looking here for younger kids at a boat or a train pulling a certain number of items, and then you want to make them equate each other or equal to each other. So here there's 3 boxes and this one's pulling 2 boxes, so we need to add 1. So which one below goes here to make them equal? And it would be this one. And here we have 2 items, 2 lemons, and what we want is this ultimately to equal 2. And so when they have X's on the lemons, that means you subtract them. So if we subtract these 2, we'll have 4 left, but we want to get to 2, so we need 2 more subtracted, and this would be our answer. So that's how those work. And then here, what you have is, as the kids get older, they will see equations like these, which would be equal or more or less. But what we have here is 9 plus 7 is 16, is more than 8 plus 2, which is 10, plus 5 to make it 15. And that's going to be the answer. And then here they look like this as well. And so the child has to figure out, okay, if you put 27 in here, how do we make them equal? So the diamond is 27, so that's 17. So 3 plus what equals 17? And it would be 14. So that's how you work these. So with younger kids, you want to teach them to just count the number of items in the first train, figure out how many things need to be added or subtracted from the second train to make the 2 carry the same numbers, and then just eliminate answers that don't make the 2 trains carry the same number of things. With older kids, these are just basic equations. So just remind them that. So they need to perform all the necessary calculations to make the equation signs equal, or sometimes it's more or less. So they've got to look at that sign that they have right here, because that guides what they're looking for. And when it's like this, where you have like a diamond equals so-and-so, make sure they do need to work from the bottom up to figure it out. So often with younger kids, the types of mistakes they might make is they just don't understand what they're being asked to do, which is why practice is so important. So if they don't understand what they're being asked to do, they may just pick an answer that matches one of the answers they see above. So that's a very common mistake. And then some kids just don't yet have the math skills to handle these questions. And with older kids, you'll see some of the mistakes is they might work from the top down and make a mistake, or they just might use the wrong, they might add when they need to subtract, and they might try to solve for the symbol rather than the question mark. So they might, here we don't have 27 in here, but they might think they're trying to solve for this symbol, not for the question mark. So again, practice is very, very important for this test, because then they see what they're supposed to be doing. And also when you practice with your child, you see if your child has the math skills they need to do well on this test. So now let's look at the nonverbal questions, because that's the last type of question you're going to see. And I know this is a lot, but I just want to I'm going through it fast, but you can go back and look at this presentation in more detail if your child is having trouble on any of these types of questions. So with figure matrices, very similar to the picture matrices that we looked at before, there's a rule that's guiding what's happening on top, and we just apply the rule to the bottom. And it's the same, these questions are the same for younger kids and older kids. The biggest difference between them is that for younger kids, it's usually just one thing is going on, just like it is here. So here, the colors are switching places. That's the only thing going on. With older kids, you might have more than one thing going on, like colors may switch places and sizes change, or, more than one thing happens. But with younger kids, it'll probably just be one thing. So again, you want to teach your child how to handle these types of questions. They figure out the rule, they apply the rule below, and then they look for the answer choice that works, which would be here. Very common mistakes is they might pick something that looks more like the figures on top. So they might just pick this one because it looks more like those. They might infer the wrong rule. That happens a lot. And it helps if the child says the rule out loud or to themselves. They say the rule, so they're looking for to apply the rule specifically. Or they might miss something that's happening across the figures, and they might just misunderstand the rule itself. Now, I want to recommend that you go again to testingmom.com/classes testing. And I do have something on the secret to solving analogy questions for nonverbal analogies. And we go over all of the most common types of analogies that you'll see in these types of questions. And here they are. There's 10 of them. The changes to look for. And as I said, with younger kids, it's usually just one change. With older kids, it can be 2, 3, even 4 changes that take place in a figural analogy question. Then we've got paper folding. That's the next type of question. And what this is kids will see a piece of paper and diagram, and that's folded. So we fold it, we punch a hole in it. And the question is, what's it going to look like when we open it up? Which one of these will it look like? And here's an easy one for younger kids. Here's a harder one for older kids. And so what you want to teach your child to do is imagine what this is going to look like when it's unfolded. How will this cutoff be reflected on the other side? And so they have to imagine that. And you have to teach them that each time you you fold the paper and put the hole in it, there's 2 layers of paper now with a hole. So that means this is going to double. There's going to be 2 holes. And then remember, if we fold the paper another time, then there's going to literally be 4 layers here. And so there's going to be 4 holes. So they just have to know that. And you want to look at the answer choice, and you can certainly help them eliminate easily what we know is going to be wrong. So we know there's got to be 2 holes, right? So for example here, so this is going to be wrong. This is going to be wrong. It's going to be one of these. So, you can teach them the process of elimination. If they have trouble with these, use real square pieces of paper and fold them and put holes in them, and then see if they can describe what it's going to look like when you open it up. Sometimes they need to see it physically to help them answer these questions. The other thing is we have a folding question game on our website. In fact, I can show it to you really quickly. Let's see, right here. And where kids can actually see let me turn it down a little bit because it's kind of loud, but I'll show you. They can see it folding, and they can see the hole being pressed in it. You can see it there. What's it going to look like? I'm going to get it right.
Yes.
So there's an easy one. So here's another one. So they can actually see it being folded here. And this got folded twice, right? So I believe this would be the answer.
Yes.
There you go. So that's a game. And this is something that they can do on the website to play and get better and better at these types of questions. Here are the common mistakes kids make. They pick the first answer that seems right. They ignore the angles of the folds. They when the paper's unfolded, they see the one or two holes, but they don't realize where they need to be. They really don't use their reasoning skills to figure out where their holes need to be, or they forget how many times the paper was folded. These are all very common mistakes kids make. And so practice is the best thing for this type of question. And then the last type of question on the test are the figural classification questions. And I'm just showing you two examples right here. So it's very much like the picture classifications. What is the same about these pictures? And we're looking for one over here that is the same. When I look at these, I see what is the same is we've got 3 blacks and 2 reds, and there's always one in the middle. So which one of these belongs? It would be this one. It's the same thing. This one, what this is, and this is when you only know once you practice, but this is a rotation. So this is the same figure rotated. So we just need to look for this very same figure rotated, and that is B. And it's only through practice that you learn to recognize these. So the strategy you want to teach your child is to kind of talk through in their own minds, what is the rule guiding this? And so, for example, with this one on the bottom, it's like, well, what's the rule? The rule is every one of these shapes has 7 sides. So do we have one over here with 7 sides? Yes, right here, A. So the more they practice, and I won't go through all of them, but the more they practice, the more familiar they will get with the kinds of questions and the kinds of things that happen to the figures, because it's all very repetitive. So for example, here, this is a same figure rotated. And this, if you look at this one, it's, they all have 3 shapes and one is always black. So which one of these fits? Number 4, 3 shapes, one is black. But if you practice, you would recognize that. So practice is what you need to do. Okay, so I've made a list here of what are not just for this particular test, but for all tests, but this one especially. What are the most common mistakes that kids make? And it's all the things. It's like being unprepared, not really understanding the different types of questions, not knowing that they can eliminate answers that are wrong before guessing. Kids can be careless. They don't read the question carefully. They don't consider all the answer choices. Sometimes they rush. They lose focus during a test, or they don't pace themselves. They are offered scratch paper for math, and they don't use it. They fall victim to the distractors. They get stuck on one question. I mean, these are the common errors that kids make. So if you see your child making an error like that, you want to correct them, because they will lose as many points just by making these types of mistakes as they would lose if they just made a mistake on a type of question. And I put this in here just to give it to you when you go back. If you have a child who has test anxiety, these are some things that kids can do to help them go through a test and do their best. And it's for kids who get nervous. And so I also put a link here for you, or I wanted to show you that if you go to that classes page to study skills, there's a whole webinar on test anxiety for kids who have that. And I wanted you to know about that. Now, I want to just point out places on the Testing Mom website where you can practice for this test. And all the help that we have for you. And I know that many of you on this call tonight are members, so here's what you do. You just log into Testing Mom, you go to Test Prep, and you choose View All Tests, and then you go to the CogAT test right here. Then you go to the CogAT page, where on this page we have literally over 4,000 practice questions for you. So there's lots to practice with at every grade level. And my recommendation is always start below your child's grade level with the very easiest questions and let them work their way up to their level and then go beyond their level if they can. Because remember, it's a cognitive test. So it's not so dependent on what they've learned in school. So that's a good tip. Also, if you choose this green bar, you can go to interactive questions. Here, these questions, if you just go to the page, you can print them, or they're static, or you can just do them on the page together and see how your child thinks. The other thing I want to point out to you is when you're on the Testing Mom site, go to interactive games. Here is where, if you're on the CogAT page and you click the middle button, it'll take you to all of these games. Here's the folding question game. Digital Tutor is where you do interactive questions. Analogy Galaxy has analogies, so you can go there as well. And then IQ Fun Tree for younger kids has a lot of questions that are very helpful for the CogAT as well. And also in our Skill Building Academy, so again, when you log in, go to our Skill Building Academy, we have a number of learning programs where your child can work, let me go back. Here they can work on vocabulary. All of these here are math programs where they can really build up their math skills because they need that for this test. And Here Builder is where they learn to listen and follow directions, which younger kids doing the sentence completion need that for the sentence completion. They have to listen and remember because the questions are not repeated. The other thing we have is on Amazon, you can use, we have flashcards, and they're kind of fun, and kids can do practice questions using their flashcards. We have them from 5th grade through 7th grade. And the other two things we have that I want to point out is I gave you a list here of all of the different classes that I've mentioned earlier that you can go to get more information about the CogAT test and about the math questions, the patterning questions, serial reasoning, analogies. These are all trainings on different types of questions if you need it, if your child needs it. And test anxiety, we have a lot here, so just go there and you can check those out. The other thing is we are doing small camps for CogAT right now every week. So go to our testingmom.com/camps. And for example, next week we have camps at these grade levels, small groups where we work through each type of question together. And a lot of what I've just gone over, we teach the kids. People who have been tutoring for this test for a very long time teach these classes, and they really help the kids learn how to manage them. And then the last thing I want to bring up is the other thing we have, if you would like it, if you want your child to do one-to-one tutoring, we do have one-to-one tutoring. And so I'm going to just show you really quickly how that works. We literally do online tutoring with kids as young as 4. This is like I believe a 5-year-old who's being tutored here. I'm just going to show you how it works. It's done over Zoom, 1-to-1, and they do practice questions. So let's see.
Okay, you got it?
Let me show you.
Okay, and then you're going to choose the picture on the bottom that shows what the paper will look like when you unfold it.
I think it's 1.
You think it's number 1? Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Let's move on to the next one. Okay, so let's look at the paper here.
I was going to say, this little girl is getting an assessment right now. One of the first things we do is we assess to see what your child needs to work on. And so she's in the middle of an assessment. So that's why the teacher's not yet going over the answers, but she later goes back and goes over the answers with the child.
This one is folded diagonally. If you look at the arrows, they fold diagonally. Okay. So do you have paper? You want to fold it diagonally?
Fold diagonally?
Oh my goodness.
Baby?
Sure, that would work great.
Okay, baby.
We let them work with paper to first learn how to do these.
Okay, I folded it diagonally.
Okay, and now you see these 3 holes?
Yep.
On this side of the fold, right? Okay, so if you opened it, if you put those 3 holes in there, and then you open that paper up, which picture do you think it would look like? How many holes do you think there will be when you open it up?
B.
In B? Okay.
Actually, she's right. Right? Yeah, that's right. So that gives you an example of kind of what it looks like when they're doing their tutoring. But if this is something you would like, it is something we can do with your child if you wanted one-to-one tutoring, even if it's just on a couple of different types of questions maybe that your child is having trouble with. So, I didn't get very many questions this time. If anybody, I know I went really fast. Okay, so if anyone does have any questions, feel free to put them into the Q&A box. But the only question I have right now is what grade levels does the CogAT test cover? And the CogAT test starts, we have kids as young as kindergartners taking it, and it goes all the way through high school. So, and it just gets harder and harder each time. And of course, there's different types of questions that I've tried to show you all along that, for example, the analogies are words for older kids and pictures for younger kids. And in this 5, 6 to 8 level is kindergarten to 2nd grade. And then beginning at 3rd grade, that's when they start getting the words, and the levels 9 and above. So it literally starts at kindergarten and goes through high school. So I do know that we did go rather quickly through everything, but I wanted to just talk through some of the different strategies that you can teach your child for every type of question. So if you start working with your child and you're working with Testing Mom and you're working with all of our questions and you're seeing that your child might be having trouble with certain types of questions, come back to this presentation, look at the strategies for that type of question, look at the common mistakes, and try to guide your child a little bit on just, how to avoid the mistakes, or make sure they're using the strategy of figuring the rule out before they choose an answer, that kind of thing. So like I said, this will be up on our website at testingmom.com/classes. And if you are interested in small groups right here, just go to testingmom.com/camps. And you can sign your child up for a camp. And we're going to be doing these every week at different times. So just check out our schedule and you can find something that works for you. Or just if you want one-on-one tutoring, you can go here. Or if you feel like you're a do-it-yourselfer and you want to work with your child yourself, just join and work with all of the different questions here. So those are a lot of different options you have, and whatever is the best way for you to work with your child to get them ready for testing, that's what you should do. So okay, I think that's it. I don't think we have any more questions. Let's see. Nope. Okay. All right. Well, thanks everybody, and we did it in an hour. That was pretty fast. Okay. Good night.